Now, thank you. Welcome, everybody. We're going to call this meeting to order now. It is 7 p.m. on July 25th, 2022. And this is a public meeting on the City of Portland Police Accountability Commission Subcommittee on Research. If the Spanish language interpreters, Maria and Gabriela, can please give the information on the Spanish language interpretation now.
Buenas tardes, vamos a empezar la reunión, son las 7 de la noche, el 25 de julio de 2022. Esta es una reunión pública del Comisionado de Responsabilidad Policíaca, el Subcomité de Investigación. Para las personas que ocupan interpretación, se va a poner un botón abajo que dice English Spanish y ahí pueden darle ahí en el enlace para ir al canal de español cuando se abra.
Muchas gracias, María.
Okay.
The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Andrea and Amanda. You can pin their video feed if that is helpful to you. Finally, the closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance. But please note that this is an automatic captioning services and it is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov. to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to the City of Portland Administrative Code and Oregon State Law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. As the commissioners are presenting and or discussing things, if attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings and agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the questions and answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click the Q&A icon in the middle of your screen. And now we will pass to the PAC land acknowledge. The Portland metro area rests on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Banzo Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molala, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. Indigenous people have created communities and summer encampments to harvest and enjoy the plentiful natural resources of the area for the last 11,000 years. We want to recognize that Portland today is a community of many diverse Native people who continue to live and work here. We respectfully acknowledge and honor all Indigenous communities, past, present, and future, and are grateful for their ongoing and vibrant presence. We also acknowledge the systemic policies of genocide, relocation, and assimilation that still impact many Indigenous and Native American families today. As settlers and guests of these lands, we respect the work of Indigenous leaders and families and pledge to make ongoing efforts to recognize their knowledge, creativity, and resilience. Now we're gonna review and read, each person will read the community agreements. We will have time to, there is 2 pages, and just to situate ourselves and our future conversation in these 2 hours and this agreement, and to really reflect, not just read it, but really with in intention of each of the participants, please. We'll start. Thank you very much. And please, I will ask participants of this conversation, if you agree to these community agreements, please give me your thumbs up that I can see. Yeah. Thank you, commissioners. Okay, now I will pass it to the co-chairs to discuss the timeline.
Thank you. My name is Commissioner Angie Tomlinson, and I will be giving this portion of it. The commission is currently in the fact-finding phase of work, expected to go into at least August. It includes hearing from key stakeholders, identifying barriers to accountability in Portland presently, and examining systems of accountability from other jurisdictions. It also includes increased community, community engagement work. Future phases of work will develop the parameters for the new police accountability system before the commission presents that to the City Council in 2023 for their consideration and approval. If you could, thank you so much. Following today's meeting, here are the next several upcoming meetings for the PAC. The subcommittee will meet on August 1st and August 8th, the next 2 Mondays. The PAC Subcommittee on Community Engagement Events will meet on August 15th. The PAC will also meet as a full commission this Thursday, July 28th, to hear from the Portland Police Association and Commissioner Ryan. It will meet each Thursday in August to discuss the areas of agreement that it develops, as well as those developed by this subcommittee and referred to the full commission. This slide is the current project plan for the fact-finding phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. It's not the agenda and it's not set in stone. This slide is mostly for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase, which focuses on identifying areas of agreement among commission members as to barriers to accountability in the current system, best practices from Portland and other jurisdictions, and suggestions to consider from experts, as well as taking public comment and meeting with key stakeholders. Today's meeting is in the green box just below the center of the screen with the purple border. And we will review today's meeting purpose. Today's meeting agenda focuses on hearing member research conducted since the last meeting, as well as discussing commonalities and items that members would like to include as best practices or practices to avoid from other jurisdictions. We'll start with other jurisdictions, hearing 4-minute reports on each jurisdiction from the subcommittee member before discussing which items subcommittee members would like to recommend that the full commission designate as best practices. Then we'll identify next steps in research to other jurisdictions. We'll repeat the same process with experts and academics, and then take public comment towards the end of the agenda. And I just want to put a caveat in there that Sophia and I might be turning off our cameras because we're trying to take notes during this meeting, and there's kind of a lot going on. So just an FYI, if our cameras are turned off, it just means that we're doing a lot of writing, and at least for me, that I'm trying to write and multitask with this meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Angie. And now we're gonna go to the best practice. And this is the members' research reports that we expect to hear from today. You don't have to follow this order, but we would like to start with the reports. And just a reminder to be this is not a conversation, but just remember to be as brief as you can, given the report, and to give opportunities if somebody has questions or comments. And anyone can start. Who will you like to start?
Well, I'm happy to start.
Thank you, Commissioner Melissa.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Lavisa Lloyd. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a member of the commission. I was looking at the laws in Maryland, in particular, this really interesting legislation that just passed. Maryland General Assembly, the Maryland Police Accountability Act of 2021, Police Discipline and Law Enforcement Programs and Procedures, which if you want to look it up, it's House Bill 670, and I can post it in the chat so you can take a look at it. But we had talked about it a little bit last time because it's this really interesting legislation that revamps police accountability systems across the entire state of Maryland. Every county and also the city of Baltimore have to conform their police accountability systems to this new structure. And let me see, hold on. Just go ahead and paste that. And essentially the structure is kind of this three-part system in which every jurisdiction must have a police accountability board, is what they call it, which is a civilian board, which can take complaints, and then there's an administrative charging committee, which is also civilian, which makes decisions about discipline, which is really interesting. And then the subject officer has the choice to accept that discipline or reject it. Sorry, actually, it technically it goes to, I think, the chief law enforcement officer. Goes to their chief, who has the option to deviate upward from that discipline, but not deviate downward from it. And then it goes to the officer, who has the option of choosing to accept the discipline, or they then can choose not to accept it, in which case it goes to a trial board. The trial board, I looked into it a little more, and I looked specifically at like the exact language about it, which I think is pretty interesting. The trial board is composed of 3 people. It's composed always of 1 civilian who is chosen by the Police Accountability Board. So it's a civilian who's chosen by civilians. 1 law enforcement officer of the same rank as the subject officer, who is chosen by the chief law enforcement officer. So a police officer who's chosen essentially by a police officer, and 1 administrative judge or retired administrative judge who is chosen by the county, the like chief executive officer basically of the county. So kind of the people sometimes call it the county mayor, basically the chief administrator of the county. So an administrator chosen by an administrative judge chosen by an administrator, and those are the three people who sit on that trial board. And then the subject officer, then the trial board can come to their conclusion, and the subject officer then has the option, if they want to appeal that decision, and that appeal goes to the local circuit court. And I think Commissioner Handelman had a question about it going to the circuit court. So I was just taking a look at the language of the bill, which is interesting because only the officer has the right to appeal to the circuit court. The complainant does not have that right. The complainant does have the right to attend the trial board hearing, which is interesting. It's a public hearing. There are a few things which can be kept confidential, or reasons why not everything might be public, but in general, it is supposed to be a public hearing, which is interesting. But I was taking a look at it, and actually maybe it would help if I don't know, can Samir, can you make it possible for me to share my screen? Because if so, I could put some of the language kind of up. Thank you, yeah. Okay. So this is the the language, and this sort of explains a little bit that a police officer aggrieved by the findings and order of the commission may take an appeal as allowed in sections 10.222 through 10.223 of the state government article, which if you flip over to, I just looked at Justitia, which offers this, citation to the Maryland State Government Code here, which essentially is saying, except as provided, elsewhere, a party who's aggrieved by the final decision in a contested case is entitled to judicial review of the decision as provided in this section. Jurisdiction and venue, unless otherwise required by the statute, a petition for judicial review shall be filed with the circuit court for the county where any party resides or has a principal place of business. So, if you just take a look at where appeal shows up, they have 30 days after the trial board decision to appeal that decision. And they're pretty specific. If the trial board is from a local law enforcement agency, they appeal to the circuit court of the county in which the law enforcement agency is located. If the trial board is from a statewide or by county law enforcement agency, it goes to the circuit court, for, in this case, this is Anne Arundel County. But yeah, so I just thought this was pretty interesting because it kind of shows how here, I'll stop my share. It shows how in this case, Maryland had a law enforcement officer's Bill of Rights, which was repealed also by this legislation, but they still have to fit everything that they're doing in under the legal structure that still exists. Okay, that's about it for me. I think that's all that I have on that for right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa. And I know Commissioner Sophia wanted to comment or ask something, but she needed to step in out for a minute. We will.
I have a question. I'm so sorry. I couldn't get to my hand raising thing because it's in this weird part of my, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. So Lovisa, thank you, Commissioner Lovisa, for doing that research. What aspects of their system did you think was something that we might want to consider, number one, but then number two, this law enforcement Bill of Rights, was there any historical information on that?
Sure, thanks. Those are great questions. Well, I'll answer the second one first. The Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights is something that is codified in state government constitutions, I think in maybe 11 states, 15 states. A handful of states have it officially in the constitutions, and then more states have some references or allusions to it in things like local laws or collective bargaining discussions. So I think that is a topic that we should look at a little bit more in depth as it applies to the state of Oregon. But kind of going back to your first question, aspects of this system that I thought were interesting. The idea of the trial board is a really interesting idea. Because I think that we kind of come back to this idea over and over again of votes. Who has how many votes? And in this particular case, they've sort of standardized it to there are three people, essentially a cop who's chosen by a cop, a civilian who's chosen by civilians, and an administrator who's chosen by administrators. And it's interesting to me because it sort of seems like, if the police officer is maybe perhaps more likely to vote one way, and if the civilian is perhaps more likely to vote the other way, then I assume that the role of the administrative law judge is to kind of be the mediating factor or the moderating factor of some kind there. And I know we've talked a lot about just wanting to be really, really aware of like who is getting representation when it comes to making final decisions about things. So I think that's an interesting thing to look at. I'm not sure having the 3 is exactly the best practice, but it's at least a little bit more balanced than some other systems that we've looked at in terms of number of votes.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa. And Commissioner Sophia, do you have a question for Commissioner Lovisa? No, or a comment? No? Okay. Thank you. Who will be next? Okay, Commissioner Debbie, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm ready to go next. I'll start with Seattle because I presented Oakland before. I have a few updates from an interview I did today on Oakland, but Seattle's the one that I just finished a couple days ago. So there's 3 major elements to the Seattle system. They have the Office of Police Accountability, which is a civilian-led hybrid oversight agency that investigates allegations of employee misconduct. And the different thing that's in here that I mentioned actually at a previous meeting was they have civilian investigators and police sergeants working together on the investigations. And the advantage of that is because they're administratively part of the police department, they have access, easy access to all the files and information and officers and everything. And I'm not suggesting that that's something we want to do. I just thought it was interesting. And then they have an Office of Inspector General for Public Safety, and that person's been on the job for a few years, and she conducts systemic and the civilian agency audits, conducts systematic and OPA audits and reviews and makes recommendations. And she will fill the role of the court monitor once the consent decree ends. And the other interesting role that this office has is they review all of the investigations to make sure they're complete, thorough, the whole thing, and then certifies them once they're done. So you know that you have a separate set of eyes that's checking the investigations to make sure that they're the way, as complete as you would like them to be. Then there's a Community Police Commission, and that group provides community input on policing and police reform. They don't appear to have any kind of real role in the discipline system, except from the policy angle. There's 21 commissioners. 2 of the positions are reserved for public defense or civil liberties attorneys. There's 1 police union representative on the commission and 1 police management association representative. And then they have 7 staff members. A police commission member has a seat at the bargaining table for union negotiations. And they also appear to do a lot of lobbying at the legislature for reform measures. So they're working at the statewide level to remedy some of the barriers to good police accountability in Washington and Seattle. And they do a lot of, the amount of community engagement they do was rather remarkable. I think it's in their annual report from, I forgot if it was last year or the year before, they had 84 separate engagements with the public. And one time they had a Zoom meeting where they went over their capacity for the Zoom account. So then they had to live stream on a social media platform. So yeah, so they're definitely well connected with the community. So then I picked out a few interesting features from the whole system. And one is OPA posts closed case summaries on its website. So you can go to their website and have them all listed with a summary of the incident and alleged misconduct, as well as the OPA director's response to each allegation of misconduct. And if discipline is imposed, the type and severity of discipline is on the report that's on the website, but they do not include employee or complainant names. So it's all anonymous. And then they have an interesting system for when police sworn employees appeal their the findings of discipline on their cases, and they either can go through the Public Safety Civil Service Commission or arbitration, their choice. So the interesting thing about the Civil Service Commission hearings, they are open to the public, but arbitration isn't. And not a lot of them pick the the Public Safety Civil Service Commission, but it's there anyway. And the police department does not wait for the appeal to be completed before they impose the discipline. And then I found something on the OPA section of the website. In June 2021, they completed a complainant experience survey. And so they talked to, had phone interviews with 6 people who had used the system. And then they did an online survey to over 400 people. And they got a little over 20% response from the online survey. And then based on the feedback they got, they actually have in this report recommendations for the way they're going to improve how they, the complaint process, including one of the ideas was hiring a complaint navigator. And another one was communicating with complainants on a more frequent basis. And the last thing that I thought that really stood out for me was the Office of Inspector General leads these Sentinel event reviews, where they aim to identify the causes and contributing factors to undesired incidents with the goal of prevention. So they're kind of big picture looks. There's no accountability thing. It's just a matter of learning from things that people found undesirable. So 2 reviews are available on their website. They both are in regard to the police response to the 2020 protests that were in Seattle. And they actually form a whole Sentinel event panel that's made up of, carefully selected community members, law enforcement, and representatives from the OIG. So I thought that kind of stood out for me. And then the other thing is, today I had an interview with a representative from Oakland who was involved in the. She's been involved in this. She's an advocate, activist in Oakland, been involved in issues of police accountability since the 90s. And so she kind of gave me the whole history of all the things that have gone on in Oakland, which, as you imagine, was very interesting. So, but there were a few things from her thing that and what I've done since also in Oakland was that stood out. So I attended a meeting of this advocacy group that she's a member of, and their guest speaker was their new inspector general. And so she actually came from Baltimore, and she's been there about 7 months, I think. She's sort of just getting started on doing things. She has minimal staff at this point, but she's obviously got big plans, and everybody was happy to talk to her. Then I watched a July police commission meeting the thing that they talked about that was really fascinating was in Oakland, their civilian agency and internal affairs, they conduct parallel investigations of the same case. Whoever gets to the finish line first tells the other one, this is what I found out. And the other one is able to say, looks good to me, I agree. And then they go forward from there. Well, people were starting to get, skeptical of the fact that was happening, that they agree all the time. And so now what they want to do is require both the CPRA and the internal affairs to both finish their investigations before they confer. And one of the people who came to the meeting was the interim executive director of the CPRA, and he seemed to be in agreement with that idea. And so that's something that sounds like they're going to be doing. And then another interesting feature of Oakland's is they have, if at the end of the 2 investigations there's a disagreement, and it's not resolved, then the police commission forms a discipline committee made up of 3 people from the police commission, and then they make the final call. Well, so I was asking this woman I talked to today, and she said the discipline committee has only met once or done its thing one time. And she said everybody realizes that is an indication of a problem, the fact that there's never any disagreement. And so that's kind of what's been the impetus between this thing of having both of them get to the end before they confer. So that seems like that's sort of happening. One interesting thing, the one time the discipline committee did meet, it resulted in the firing of 4 police officers, and then also this police commission has the ability to fire the police chief, which happened as well. And so that was kind of a big step. And then the last thing, when I asked her about barriers, she said, I thought this was a great answer. She said, there are no barriers. We gave them everything that they need to have a really empowered oversight system. They have authority over Inspector General, the Executive Director of the CPRA, the Executive Director, CPRA Executive Director, the Police Chief. They can fire all of those people, and they have a role in hiring them. And they have independent legal counsel. They have subpoena power. They have the ability to compel testimony. She said they just now. It just needs to sort of, really get going and make things happen. So those are my 2 reports for today.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Very interesting report. And Commissioner Angie, and then Commissioner Dan.
Thanks. I'll try to be relatively short. So with Oakland, the civilian agency and the internal affairs, that kind of seems like overkill, or like not very efficient.
I was asking her about that because, in Portland, the Department of Justice did not believe that Portland should be having internal affairs and IPR kind of overlapping in function, but they're, they have a monitor there, and they're not, I don't ask me why they let them get away with it, but they're getting away with it. And it is,
okay.
They did. So she told me, though, they had a process a year ago of kind of another sort of community effort. And out of that was a recommendation to hire a consultant to look at just moving all of the investigations over to the civilian agency, and then having internal affairs, not overlap, not do the same work. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Dan?
I first lowered my hand because Commissioner Iona got to the point I was going to make. I'm Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a commissioner. And I'm also curious why the DOJ told Portland not to do simultaneous investigations, but said it's okay in Oakland. But it gets back to a point I raised at the last regular meeting of the commission, which is that I don't think we've been briefed by the DOJ here yet. I think it'd be helpful if everybody on the commission knows what the parameters are that the US DOJ has put on the city of Portland, because if what we design doesn't meet those parameters, we're going to get it kicked back, and not to us, because we will be gone by then. So we should make sure to look at those when we're thinking about best practices on top of everything else. Thank you.
That jogs my memory, Commissioner Handelman, was when I asked about that. The thing about the overlapping, sorry, I just did this today, and I've had all sorts of other things that I've been doing today. So I haven't typed up my notes or anything, but because it seemed weird to me too. She said the reason why they have internal affairs doing the investigation and the CPRA is because they're still dealing with the requirements of their consent decree, or whatever it's called, their agreement. Because that requires internal affairs to do certain things. So they can't just tell internal affairs to quit doing those things because the federal government or somebody is requiring them. They also have definitely a different situation than we have in Portland. That the reason they have all of this oversight is because there was a lawsuit from community members who've been harmed by the police, and that ended up resulting in a negotiated agreement. There was both a class action and an individual lawsuit. And so the 2 sides then, or the 3, however many sides there were, they agreed on having this outside monitor. And what I don't understand, to tell you the truth, is to what extent the federal government is involved. It could just be that, and she told me when I asked about who else to talk to, she recommended I talk to the lawyer who was involved in this lawsuit, and sent me his contact information. So then if I talk to him, then I might be able to understand better why this is different than kind of what's going on in Portland with our settlement agreement. So sorry, I have sort of a fuzzy understanding, but that's kind of the best I could come up with.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Who wants to go next? Commissioner Catherine?
Okay, I can go. I looked at the city of Chicago, and the reason I jumped up to go next is because there's a lot of similarities, I think, with Oakland and the report that Debbie just gave. I will say right off the bat that in my research, I kept hearing and seeing references to Oakland as really sort of the best in class, the one that where Oakland had managed to get as much of sort of the, the recommendations for best practices in place as any jurisdiction in the country. And it's interesting, as I, have worked on excessive force cases in the past, I often got referred to Oakland as the place to go look at their directives on use of force for the same reason, because with all the community involvement and all the litigation, I think they've ended up developing some model policies and model frameworks. So I just want to make that comment about Oakland before I move into Chicago. So Chicago is kind of an interesting story. It's a tragic story. They're, were plugging along with some pretty ineffective, IPR type agency, in 2014, probably some of you will remember that a 17-year-old Black man was shot 16 times by an officer who claimed that this young man was lunging at him with a knife. And 13 months later, the Chicago police had released the dash camera footage, which showed that he was walking away from the officer, shot in the back, then while he was down, shot 16 more times. So that created, a pretty significant uprising in Chicago around, it was really the thing that ignited the community around the need for change and police accountability. So everything changed after, it took a while, but everything that is currently in place in Chicago occurred after and in response to the murder of Mr. McDonald. His family ultimately was given a $5 million settlement. The officer who was involved in the shooting was convicted of second-degree murder, served sentenced to 7 years, served 3, was recently released. So that's the story that started the framework or the current model in Chicago. The mayor appointed a task force, and that task force came up with multiple recommendations, and really it looked like Chicago just decided, I'm sure you've all read about the 3 models, investigative, review, and auditing models. And Chicago, I think, really just decided to do all of them. And so you now have in Chicago, they replaced what was their sort of independent police board, review board, with something called COPA, which I'll talk about. It's their main police accountability, civilian investigatory function. But they've also done 2 other things. One is they appointed Inspector General for Public Safety, similar to what Debbie just described for Seattle. They basically just created a new section in their Inspector General's office, which I guess would be the equivalent of the auditor's office in Portland. And that person basically does kind of reviews all of the entities involved in oversight, which in Chicago is COPA, the oversight or the investigatory function, Chicago Police Department, and then something called the Police Board, which is where appeals of serious discipline go. So the Inspector General's office was created for public safety. Then they reconstituted their oversight board into what's now COPA. And then the third thing just recently happened within the last year. They created an oversight commission, which is a 7-person commission with the authority to hire and fire the heads of the Chicago Police Department, COPA, and the police board. So they have that oversight ability plus the ability to draft policies and procedures. So that is brand new. They're just now appointing the interim board. The way that's going to work is that every district within the city will have a 3-person board for that particular district. Those 3-person boards then elect the 7-person oversight commission for the entire city that has this ability to hire and fire and create directives. So that is new, and that is really the last part of the task force. That's recommendations that has been implemented. So that's kind of your audit function, your kind of review function in that new commission, and then the investigatory function is in COPA. And COPA is basically took their old civilian review commission and addressed what was the biggest problem in that commission, which was under their collective bargaining agreements, anonymous complaints were not allowed. So once a complaint was filed, the review board or the review commission had to get an affidavit from the complainant, basically verifying the complaint. And if they did not, they were not able to get that affidavit, then the complaint was not investigated. So at the time in 2014, when everything blew up, at that time, the board was not investigating, I think, over 40% of the complaints. So that the most important reform, I think, that was instituted was the ability to override that that affidavit requirement and allow the COPA to review complaints, anonymous complaints or non-verified complaints, and then recommend to the head of internal affairs that the complaint proceed without verification. And the way they worked that, and I guess this was all negotiated through the collective bargaining process, is that the head of internal affairs then him or herself verifies the complaint and allows it to go forward. So that appears to have cleared that roadblock, and now most complaints are being investigated. Beyond that, I would just say COPA has really, I think, is designed to address all of the concerns and eliminate all of the barriers that we've talked about. They have subpoena power. People within the Chicago Police Department, as a condition of their employment, are required to cooperate and participate in any investigation from COPA. COPA has a requirement to contact the complainants within 5 days of receiving the complaint, confirm the receipt of the complaint, and then the complainant is in regular communication with the board and gets the results of the finding at the end. The COPA recommends discipline to the Chicago Police Department. If they don't agree on the discipline, the police department and COPA, it goes to the police board. A 3-person panel resolves the dispute over discipline, and in cases of where the recommended punishment is discharge, it automatically goes to the police board, and the police board, all of their processes are open to the public. At the end of the investigation process, all complaints are the resolution of all complaints are captured in a final summary, which is posted on their website and available to the public. The piece that is not as well fleshed out, because it's really in the collective bargaining agreements, are the right to file a grievance, and how the grievance either goes into arbitration or into this kind of resolution through the department itself, the police department itself. And that is a pretty complex thing. The auditor's office had like 30 slides on how that all works. It depends on your rank and the discipline, how that grievance process works. But there is the ability for a police officer who's being disciplined to file a grievance and through their collective bargaining agreement, and either go to arbitration or or another alternative process, and appeal that discipline. The COPA also recommends it makes mediation available for any complaint that does not involve, like the most kind of is not a major, they could consider like a major case incident. So that mediation is voluntary, but it's available for all complaints that don't involve, use of excessive force, the most serious types of complaints. So I think that's a high level summary. I've written up the notes if people want to see any of those details.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. And Commissioner Angie, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. I just want to verify that the subpoena power is for civilians. So if there are witnesses or bar owners or whoever else, that the civilians can be subpoenaed.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's comprehensive subpoena power and investigatory power. So, and they I guess just because we were talking about the relationship between internal affairs and the civilian investigatory agencies in Chicago, COPA takes all the complaints and then refers anything with that's not in its jurisdiction to internal affairs, but they exclusively handle all of the matters within their jurisdiction, which are the most serious. Excessive force, complaints around coercion, verbal abuse, etc., officer involved shootings. COPA is frontline on all those.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. Now, next, who would like to go next? Commissioner Dan, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I also, just before I start, I just pasted in a link to what's colloquially called Oregon's Police Officer Bill of Rights. It's ORS 236.360. Commissioner Lloyd was talking about it before, so that's definitely something we need to look at as a potential barrier, but also help guide our work. So according to what it says on the agenda, I was supposed to report back on San Diego City. I tried calling them. I don't know if I said this at the last meeting. I tried calling them, and they responded and said, "We heard you wanted to apply to be on our oversight board." I'm like, "No, that's not what I said." So I tried calling again. I haven't heard back. Then I did follow up with the New York CCRB, and I heard back from their Senior Advisor and Director of Intergovernmental Affairs. I think I mentioned when I did my first presentation about this board that there are about 200 staff people there, which is really extraordinary, and especially when you think about how much it costs to live in New York City. That's they have a very large budget, but it just got larger recently. So she filled in some blanks that I couldn't find by reading stuff on the website. I asked why. Was it significant that 5 of the 15 members of their board are attorneys? And she said it was just coincidental, really. She said that there's a physician who has lived experience as a Black man from Staten Island who is a great contributor to the board. So, being an attorney isn't a requirement. I talked about that when there's serious charges that could result in discipline, it gets sent to a trial of some kind, which we've heard about in other disciplines and in other jurisdictions too. Those trials are held at police headquarters, which I'm going to just say right now, I don't think is the best practice. I think we want the ones in Portland to be held in public in places where the community can observe them, but that's, something we'll have to just hash out later. The staff attorneys that they have many, many staff attorneys at the CCRB, but they're not attorneys for the board to ask for legal advice. They're for doing these trials and other legal issues that come up as part of the casework. But when they have, like, if the board itself gets sued, they're still dependent on the city attorney's office. So that was one of the things I couldn't find online. So they do not have independent attorney. The staff attorneys also support those 3-person hearing panels. And I was describing to you how how can you have 3 people out of 15 still be diverse? And she said, well, it's 1 mayoral appointee, 1 council appointee, 1 police commissioner appointee, but that their charter, which I had not read among the paperwork I ran into, calls for the CCRB to reflect the diversity of New York City. So I think that's, you know, and that's in our charter too, how the new board's supposed to do that for Portland. Still, I don't know about the 3-person thing. All right, so they have an entire unit devoted to mediation. And like what we just heard about Chicago, they cannot mediate serious cases. And I'm really not sure how this works in terms of why the police would ever agree to do this then. But if the civilian is not satisfied with the mediation, they can request that it gets investigated. So the draw, at least here in Portland, is for an officer to participate in the mediation because they know that once it goes to mediation, there's not going to be an investigation. And if the cop thinks that the civilian still has the final say on whether that investigation happens or not, I don't know why they would voluntarily or actively participate. So, you know, something else to maybe investigate further. They have training for the board, but the person I talked to said it's not great. They want to do better. They basically just get like the manual of police operations, how the board works, what the process is, and they have so much else to do. There's so much time involved, and I think members of this commission can appreciate how much time it's going to take the people on the new board to do their work. They don't have enough training, and I don't, you know, so it's just something that, okay. I also asked why, when there's a kind of an appeal, which they call a reconsideration, the same panel hears that. I think the reason that's happening is that the appeal can only happen if there's new information introduced. It's not just because you don't like the outcome. So therefore, it's helpful to have the same people hear the case with the new information. I asked about barriers. Okay, so this is where, you know, we got into the 3 existential questions. The barriers that she identified include lack of direct access to body-worn camera footage, even though she says that Axon, which I don't know how many of you saw, the City of Portland has decided to use for their trial body cam program, has a little checkbox. You can just click and then make it available to individuals that want access to it. But they said they don't have access to it. They do not have disciplinary authority, which our board, at least nominally, is going to have. And if they could wave a magic wand and change things, they would like to have a set budget. Right? They just got a charter review where they were given, check this out, 0.65% of the police bureau's budget, which is a very small percentage. But the budget of the the New York Police is $6 billion. So that comes out to $39 million. So that's, you know, still a lot more than we have. But New York's a lot bigger city, costs a lot more to live there. Right now, they're paying kind of their first entry-level investigators really low pay, so they're getting a lot of people right out of law school to do some of the investigations and so forth. They also wanted to staff a whole new racial profiling unit with 53 people, but because that money doesn't go so far, they only could hire 33. But it's, I just want to like put a pin in an entire unit just on racial profiling. Okay. And then finally, the last question is who else should we talk to? And she suggested a couple of places we already have on our list: NACOL, National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, the San Francisco Board, and Campaign Zero, which I'll talk about later in the meeting. And she also suggested the Washington, D.C. Review System, the Center for Policing Inequity, which I have to admit I didn't even look up. And then she also sent a very, very long list of links showing how the New York system got to be where it is. And I have not followed any of that. I didn't want to burden the rest of the commission with that. I sent it to the staff so we have it on record in case anybody wants to follow up on any of these things that happen in New York. And the most exciting thing perhaps for us is that she said everybody that she knows in the oversight community around the country is looking to Portland to see how things come out here because they're excited about how our ballot, our charter amendment looked. Oh.
Thank you, Commissioner Dunn. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just as a clarifying point, the agenda said I was assigned to LA County as well. That I mentioned LA County as a place that we should look into, and I also explicitly said I really hope somebody else on the commission can do that. So I don't have any report on that. But if I'm not sure how we're going to divvy up future work. But I just want to put that on that LA County has an inspector general that we could look at, but nobody has offered to look at it yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And before we start our discussion, I think Commissioner Sophia is your next. Do you have something to report? Okay, go ahead. And I don't know who's missing. I don't know if Commissioner Monica too. Lopez. I don't know, you have something to report.
Well, Dan, Commissioner Handelman actually gave me some information related to Minneapolis that I can report on with Dan's help, perhaps, because I did read through it, but I know that I might be verbalizing it incorrectly. In that Minneapolis, is it okay if I talk right now, Sophia? Okay, thank you. So Minneapolis previously had a completely civilian board, and Dan, jump in here if I say anything wrong, please, because I read it and I'm kind of doing it off the cuff right now. I don't have notes from it. They previously had a completely civilian board that did not have subpoena power, that did not have very much power at all. When they would come up with recommendations, it would go to the police, and I think the chief, I'm not positive if it's chief, but to the police. And if the police didn't agree with it, they really, from the article and the information that Dan sent me, it doesn't seem like if the police didn't want to work with what they recommended, they just kind of didn't implement it, the discipline. And so from that, Minneapolis came up with another board that included officers on that board also. And that's what they currently have, Dan, I think. Is that what they currently, thank you. And they're working with that right now, but it doesn't, it has more power, except for they don't have the subpoena power still, I think. And which is a very, it does seem to be a very large hindrance in trying to get to justice with these cases. So if you don't have witnesses and you don't have anything except for what the complainant is saying and the police officer is saying, then then your cases are pretty weak. It sounds like from Minneapolis. So that's where they are right now with this integrated board with police officers and the civilians. And it doesn't seem like it also doesn't seem like it's working very well. But Dan, please jump in.
Go ahead, Commissioner Dan. Thank you, Commissioner Angel.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Tomlinson and Victoria. Yeah. So the old board, which it's stuck in my mind as this is what was going on there, but it actually was dissolved in 2012, recommended 53 times for officers to be disciplined, and the chief only did it 7 times out of those 53 times. So that's just, and that was one of the things that made it so that people demanded a new board, and the city basically created something that was even worse, in a sense, in my opinion. And that's also the people in Minneapolis I know feel that way. That it has 2 civilians and 2 officers to review the cases. I'm not clear how they resolve it when there's a tie, because that's you shouldn't have an even number of people voting on things. And so that's the police conduct review panel. But there's also a police conduct oversight commission, which I think I mentioned briefly at a previous meeting, that has 7 people, a 9 people possibility of 9 people sitting on it, but only 3 of them are appointed right now because people keep quitting because they have very little authority. So that's why I'm not really looking to Minneapolis for real advice about what our board should look like, but it's kind of maybe instructive of what not to do.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Lovisa?
Sure, I just wanted to say that I thought it was interesting that their fix for that problem, the problem of, they had this civilian group that was making recommendations, but then the police chief was in no way bound by the recommendations. Their fix was to add more police to the recommending panel, as opposed to creating a mechanism that would force the police chief to be bound by what the civilians had decided. And I wanted to bring that up. You had asked me what were some things about the Maryland system that I thought were good. And one thing that they have is they have this administrative charging committee, and it's a civilian committee, and it makes the charging decisions. And those are civilians deciding the charges to bring against the subject officer. And because they utilize this statewide disciplinary matrix, when you decide the charges, you're also effectively deciding the discipline. And so although technically it goes to the police chief, and the police chief, offers the discipline, and he can deviate upwards, but he cannot deviate downwards. That's another thing I thought was a good practice. In effect, the chief is not really ultimately deciding the discipline. I mean, he can change it, but like, at the administrative charging committee, the civilian committee is setting the floor for the discipline, which I thought was really, really a good practice. So, and the chief is bound by it.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa. And now that we hear of the reports, and I know Commissioner Sophia said she's gonna submit a written report, we can go and talk about which do you think should be considered best practice by the commission and which should be practices to avoid. Because this is an open discussion, and I know Commissioner Lovisa, you already started and everybody started. I just want to remind everyone to follow our normal discussion rules. Please be brief each time you speak, even till you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitator. And remember that we're now using a weighted stack in our discussions, a weighted stack in our discussion. Finally, please be forward-looking in your comments. And if the co-chairs wants to frame the discussion or want to say something, please go ahead. We will start a discussion on area of agreements or best practices. Commissioner Debbie?
Seems like we started on a list in one of our former meetings. Is that list available?
Yes, I'm pretty sure we can.
Be great if we could see it just to remind us, but and then
Commissioner Debbie, you're asking about the document we screen shared at the last meeting?
yeah, we had, some things because we were coming up with some things last time, and I felt like people were typing, you probably, Samir, were typing them, and I just thought it'd be nice to see that again.
So to clarify, and thank you to Commissioner Dan for bringing this up, the document that we looked at last was a structural draft. None of the content had been supported from a content perspective by any member. It was just in there to show what it would look like. So we can screenshot again.
Remember suggesting some things that I thought we wrote down, but maybe not.
That is not reflected in this document yet, is all I'm just trying to clarify.
So, Semi, we're starting from scratch right now.
I think I'll defer to the co-chairs on that question.
So I personally don't have any notes on what was taken in the last meeting, but we are going to send out that document, and it has like kind of a structure of what each one of us on this committee thinks is important to raise and talk about with the other subcommittee members, and start a discussion. So the document that was shared last time is just the bones. It's basically the who, what, when, where, why, and it's like a summary, and it gives like a format of what we can put into there, and just like 4 sentences about what you think is important from which jurisdiction and why you think it's important. And no, we haven't started editing that document yet, but hopefully we can get information from this meeting to edit that document. Does that make sense, Debbie? I appreciate it.
I just felt like I remember going, and I actually have a list that I had written down with about 5 or 6 things down, and I thought they were already made it onto a list, but that's okay. We can start from the top then when it's my turn.
Thank you so much for taking those notes. Appreciate it.
So I just wanted to, since I have a quiet moment here, I wanted to also make a comment on that, Debbie. Yes, we Angie and I are going to have a work meeting with ourselves to go through all of the, because we talked about this in our last meeting, her and I, that we're going to go through all of the recordings, and we're going to combine all of those comments from you all, as well as the best practices, the short form, I call it, We spoke to staff about finding a place where we can post those, like you were mentioning before. I think Samir did figure something out. I can't remember what it was, but he was trying to show me the other day where you can plop those in on the website. So we'll get that information to you as well. So you can all put your summaries in there like you were suggesting before. So everyone can be able to see the big long summaries as well as the short summaries that we come up with. I thought that would be helpful for all of us. But the form with the best practices is just basically for the highlights. You can fill more information in there if you'd like. It's just a way for us to have some kind of form, because I know each place is so different. So we're not going to be able to compare. We just want to be able to have a summary and say, these are the highlights. These are the points that we don't want to miss with these particular jurisdictions, and have those ready. And then we can go through the document and tease through there and add and just subtract whatever we need as a group. How's it sound? Sounds good. Thank you.
And let me ask Commissioner Sophia and Commissioner Angie, if they want to send you their notes and their highlights, when is the timeline for them to complete their notes and send it to you? That way, when you meet, you have everything there.
So for what you all have done so far, I don't think we sent, Angie, I don't think we sent out the form letter, did we?
No, I didn't. No, I don't think it was sent out yet.
Okay, so we'll send that out. Actually, we do have it ready. Which is, I guess we both, who thought the other one was going to send it out. So I apologize about that, but we'll send that out this evening after the meeting. And if you put those summaries in four sentences or so, however much you think is necessary, we'd like to have those back Thursday. Just for an overview, and Angie and I, we're going to be working on the weekend to kind of put all those together. So for our next meeting, I think, which is, I can't remember exactly when it is, but our next meeting is next week. We just want to have that ready for the group next week so we can go over it as a group and review it.
Thank you very much, Commissioner and Co-Chair Sophia and Angie. And now I'll pass it to Commissioner Lovisa.
Sure. Thanks everybody so much for all your work and all your research on this, and I'm sure there's going to be more to come. I think something that was interesting just hearing everybody talk through their particular jurisdictions, and also after looking at a bunch of jurisdictions, is at least as far as administrative investigations go, it's sort of funny because it's like they can be as complex as anything, right? Or they can be sort of like relatively simple and straightforward. And it's sort of occurring to me, you know, it's like if there are maybe 5 parts of an investigation, you know, there's the complaint, the investigation, the charges, the discipline, the appeal. And I noticed in a lot of jurisdictions, the way that they're attempting to increase accountability is by adding a layer of your review. And this is kind of coming back to what are the different types of accountability systems. So, you know, adding civilian, having, you know, the police do the investigation and recommend, you know, charges, but then having civilians, you know, review that. And, you know, it seems to me that the more radical systems start to, instead of just having civilians reviewing what police are doing, right, they're moving civilians into like those roles as much as is legally allowable and legally possible. And so, you know, for example, you know, in this Maryland system, you know, I was kind of looking at these 5 things: complaint, investigation, charges, discipline, appeal, and then I was kind of just making a little grid of like, okay, which things do the police do and which things do civilians do? You know, civilians who are completely outside of the police structure, the police unit, and the things that really jumped out at me are, you know, it's essentially charges and effectively discipline are the things that are in that system now completely under civilian control, which I think is pretty interesting. But I think as we're looking at all of this research, I think it'll be really interesting to kind of look at like where are civilians doing these things, because of course, you know, that's hopefully a lot of what we're going to be doing and structuring here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Dan?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. And you know, of course, the city charter says that civilians are going to be doing the investigations and that there are no police officers allowed as board members on new boards. So that's, we got a little leg up there in terms of what you were just talking about. I pulled together some stuff that I thought about from tonight's discussion, and I want to add something at the end that we haven't talked about yet, but I really want to make sure it gets put into the hopper. So I believe these are some of the best practices we've heard over the last couple of weeks. We don't want sworn statements from the community members because it's a hurdle. We don't want there to be duplicate investigations between internal affairs and the civilian board. If there are panels that are going to hear cases that are smaller than the size of the full board, they should reflect the diversity of the full board. We want to ensure that the power to subpoena and compel officers is guaranteed. Like that's also written in the charter, but people keep running into problems with these things. We want to include mediation. We want to survey the people who use the system to make improvements in the future, and that's something Commissioner Iona talked about. That's really important. They just historically, Portland used to do surveys of the people who used IPR, and they stopped doing it like 10 years ago because they didn't like the outcomes. Having an inspector or auditor to look at the broad policy patterns, I think is good. Make sure we train the board members properly. We, the city of Portland, hold public hearings as allowed by law. I think that seems to be a value everybody here seems to like. And make sure the findings are easily understandable. And that's the thing I'm throwing into the mix here. There are findings that generally there are 4 findings. There are 4 here in Portland. One of them is if the officer did something wrong. That's usually called sustained. There's one that's usually about there's what was accused of happening didn't really happen. That's usually called unfounded. And then there's one that's when there's not enough evidence, and sometimes that's called insufficient evidence, which makes sense to me. Commissioner Iona heard a new term for that today, which maybe she can share. In Portland, they call it not sustained, which doesn't make any sense because there's 3 findings that are not sustained. So I just want to make sure we don't go down that rabbit hole. And then there's another one that's called exonerated, which in New York, they now call within policy because that makes more sense. Instead of saying the officer did nothing wrong, what they're saying what the officer did was within policy. So I think that's a better term than exonerated, which is also something that Portland uses. So those are some things that I want to put. I'm putting them in the chat so that we have a written record of them to make it easier to find them again, what I just said. And I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Monica and then Commissioner Catherine.
Hi, Commissioner Monica Garcia here, she, her pronouns. I just wanted to say that, you know, reading the ballot measure that was passed in Oregon, it seems like we have a very strong place to start with. You know, it's like a lot of the things that we're learning from other places seem like they're already written into this ballot measure. So I think we're starting at a really good place, and we have a really good budget. And it seems like the people that wrote this ballot measure really took, you know, really did their homework. So that gives me a lot of reassurance. I just want to say that, you know, from learning of all of these jurisdictions, I think a lot of people are floundering out there, and I think we're going to start in a better place. So I see why people are looking at us, right? Because hopefully we come up with a really, really, really good model. And I just kind of want to put that on the record, because that's the more I look into this, the more I feel better about what that ballot measure did. So, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Commissioner Catherine and then Commissioner Debbie.
Thank you. I really appreciate Dan's list, and I appreciate him posting it in the chat because he was going too fast for me to take notes. But having looked at it in the chat, I think he's got a lot of what my takeaway is from just the reviews that I've been doing. The one thing I think we really need to emphasize is the power to, which is really what Lovisa was talking about, the power to suggest discipline. It seems like, you know, the majority of these investigatory agencies have the ability to investigate a case and maybe recommend discipline, maybe not, but almost never to, you know, be sort of the entity that is presumptively the entity that recommends the disciplinary result. So in some ways, if you can investigate, and if you don't have disciplinary authority, it's not very meaningful. And I think that it just feels like that is a big difference. And so my understanding is that maybe Maryland is the first, but that for the most part, none of these oversight boards have the power to implement discipline independently. They all have to work with the police department in some way. But I think what Maryland's doing, you know, the workaround in Chicago where there's a recommendation, and if the chief of police and the oversight entity disagree, then it goes to you know, an independent arbiter to determine what the discipline should be. It just feels like that is really where you know, I think that's how to get community confidence in the oversight board, where it really has teeth, it really is meaningful. And I think then the you know, the departments start taking it seriously. If it is a meaningful process, then I think you get deeper engagement. It feels a little bit like here so far, we've got the IPR, and then it goes to the PRB, which is sort of the black box that does discipline. And when you get to discipline in this city, it becomes, I mean, anything but transparent, anything but predictable. Whether or not, you know, that review board is actually accepting recommendations is totally unclear. We have a sense that they're not, but I think that's an issue, is just making sure that the power to recommend discipline and to have that recommendation be the presumptive outcome, I think seems very significant. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. And Commissioner Debbie?
So just as a follow-up to that, so in Oakland, if there is that disagreement between the civilian investigation and the internal affairs, and it goes to the discipline committee made up of 3 people from the police commission, their say is final on the discipline. That it says right in the ordinance that the chief nor the city administrator can change it. The officer still does have that, what's it called, loud miller, only in California they call it a Skelly hearing. So that's, you know, related to what City Attorney Brown explained to us about due process and everything. So kind of a different thing, but yeah, so they actually have the authority. But again, as they figured out, it doesn't do any good if you're not letting each of the investigations go forward on their own, so that they come to a conclusion that's kind of legitimate on both sides. So I have a list here of things that as I've been looking at this, I thought would be good to make sure to include in our system. I try not to repeat things I've already heard, but you know, I might, so sorry about that. So I like the idea of the inspector general, especially in that Seattle model, where that person also gets to double check investigations and sign off on them to make sure that they're thorough and complete. And then do the systemic reviews and the audits and all that stuff. One thing I found in that article called Arrested Oversight was that besides doing outreach to the public, it's a good idea to talk to police bureau staff to give them information on what they can do to reduce community complaints. What is it? Yeah, how can they change the way they do things in a way that, you know, makes it so people don't want to complain? I thought that seemed like a really good one. I think we should have specific requirements for the annual report that comes out of the agency, and be good to have the oversight board also have an annual report. I noticed that in some of the jurisdictions. In Seattle, they post that closed case summary online, which, you know, it's great. You can just look right down and see all the different cases and what they were about and what the outcome was and what the discipline was. And I think that's kind of a nice way to get a picture of what's going on. Really frequent contact with complainant. You know, it's nice, good to keep them up to date on what's happening with their case. And I like that idea from Seattle about the complaint navigator, so that you have somebody who kind of really is there available to help explain things as they go forward. When there are appeals by sworn officers, we've heard about some examples of having them open to the public, and that seems like a good thing to include. Required expert outside assessments of the system. Seattle has one that was completed in 2019. That would be an example to look at. Let's see. Oh, and Seattle also has their civilian board, or whatever you call it, police commission. They, on their website, have a recommendation tracker, policy recommendation tracker. So as all of these policies come forward that they're recommending, because they have time to work on policy stuff, they actually have it on their website, a whole thing explaining, you know, what they were and what the status is. They even have a thing that shows and what caused some of them not to be adopted. And the biggest thing that causes things not to be adopted is the contract with the police union. Active involvement in the police union contract might be something, I don't know how that would work out, but and then Commissioner Hannibal also talked about the follow-up on the doing the community satisfaction surveys. And one thing that I found in the Seattle one is that as one of their challenges, they are having a hard time meeting their attendance requirements, their quorum at their commission meetings. And so we might want to see if we can get in that letter we sent to City Council. We might want to have that policy in ours in the oversight system, so that they can meet and not have to cancel their meetings because of a lack of a quorum. And then, specific qualifications for some seats on the community oversight board. They have that in some places. Oakland in particular has that. And I asked the woman I talked to today if she thought that was a good idea. They have a seat for a like civil rights lawyer or a public defender type person, and reserved for that particular type for people with that expertise. Just a couple. So that's also we might want to think about qualities of board members that we would like. And then the other thing that they had in Oakland that seemed like it might be a good idea is they have a couple of designated alternate members to their police commission, the police commission, and people know who they are. They're involved in subcommittees, and then they're ready when if somebody resigns or has to leave for some reason. And so that's the list I came up with. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Commissioner Dunn?
Oh, I was just because I saw Commissioner Iona start going into a long list like mine, I put what I got out of her list into the chat. I hope it's reflective of what you said, Commissioner Iona. And I was going to also add that navigator. That's something that we talked about in the year 2000 when you and I were both on the thing that recommended what became IPR, that there should be somebody to help the complainants go through the system. I don't want to lose sight of that. And I just going back to something I can't remember exactly who brought it up, but you know, the charter says that this commission is going to be able to impose the discipline on the officers, and I think we'll have more to wrestle with around that after we have our meeting Thursday with the police association. If they answer the questions that we've posed to them, we may learn more about how, you know, what we might need to do to make sure that that can happen.
Thank you, Commissioner Dunn. Commissioner Angie?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Debbie if she has hers written, if she can either post it into the chat before Dan had said that, or if she can send it to Sophia and I, or
I'll do that because I don't know
I
don't know how to post a Word document into the chat. So
that's fine.
I'll just email it to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know, because it's 8:24, we're gonna go for a break. We're gonna take a 10 minutes break and then come back for the next step. Let's connect at 8:34. Thank you. Okay, let's continue our meeting. And I know I say, okay, let's wait a minute for everybody. Okay. They're here. Okay. Now we're gonna continue with our next steps. And at the next meeting, we will continue the discussion on best practices and practices to avoid from other jurisdictions. If you already have done research and you want to update it, please just send an email with your notes attached to staff and co-chair as we discuss it, ideally by Thursday, because they're gonna work, the co-chairs are planning to work Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, so that they can be added to the subcommittee on research resources page on the website. And I know Samir posts the website, the staff posts the website and the chat. And co-chairs can reflect your notes in the draft document. My questions to all of you are there any new jurisdictions not previously researched the members would like to claim? Additional cities or areas that you think they need to continue doing research on that any of you would you like to claim? Yes, Commissioner Monica.
I would like to propose to the group that I think we've looked at a lot of jurisdictions and we've learned a lot. And I think it would be more helpful to really think about what the best practices were in those places that we've already looked at. We've looked at a lot of places. And we know we're starting at a really good place in Portland, and what are the things that all those places that we've looked at have tried that look similar to what Portland is trying to implement, so that we kind of focus on our solutions. That's what I would like to propose.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Monica. And now Commissioner Debbie.
So I am having a hard time remembering. I feel like we talked about coming up with names of like academics and experts that we might like to have come and talk to us. And I was doing that review of the like sources that were listed at the end of the Department of Justice's book on police oversight. But and I sent updated comments on that yesterday, or I think, and to the email list. But was the research subcommittee going to invite the experts to come, or was this for the purpose of having these experts talk to the full group? Does anybody remember what our plan was on that?
And I will say before the answer, everybody answer, because I was at the meeting, I just want to know that, tell you that the next part of the meeting is reviewing about the experts.
Oh, good. Just hold my question for later.
Yes,
Okay,
but
thanks.
it's okay if somebody wants to. Okay,
Yeah.
If the experts in academics. Can we move, oh, Commissioner Dan?
Well, I mean, I heard what Commissioner Arce said, but I feel like we've used these leads to get us to other leads. I feel like there's a couple of jurisdictions that we haven't gotten to yet, like LA County listed here in the chat, and the Washington D.C., which we were just recommended by the New York board. And I think it'd be worthwhile at least touching base with a few more and digging into them. And I'm saying this by means of I still want to finish San Diego City before I move on to anything new, and I'm having a frustrating time getting to that. At the last meeting, and I think also at the last general meeting, there was discussion about some of the commissioners who aren't on subcommittees. Can we assign them maybe one city to look into? And I don't know if there was any discussion about how to help with that. But I would like to, I think that if we're going to do the service to the community of Portland that we said we were going to, I feel like we should be as thorough as we possibly can before we move on to deciding, because I think there may be some other ideas floating out there that we haven't gotten to yet. That's what I think. So.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Dunn. And what I see is the next steps is research by August 1st, and Sophia is Columbus, New Orleans, Austin, Fort Worth, and she will email it. And then Commissioner Dunn, LA County. Commissioner Catherine, are you gonna mention new?
I was just gonna volunteer to do LA since
Okay.
that ended up with Dan, and I'm happy to do it, in part because Chicago modeled a lot of what it did on LA, which was a little surprising to me, but there you go. Anyway, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. Okay, can we go to slide 15 and then 16? Because we only have a couple more minutes for the second part. Okay, the next one. Okay, we need to do reports back from the subcommittee members for the academics and experts. And because we have only 20 minutes, if we can go to the point and share what you find out, and we have the computers here. Go ahead. Who would like to start? Commissioner Catherine? Or you have your...
Yeah, I can be really quick and just say that I look at the Office of Justice Programs, and they really are more of a funder and kind of a umbrella group. So they have funded the research that some of the other folks that we're researching have done, but they themselves do not have a particular section or group of people who focus on police accountability. So I think we can basically, I looked at it, I think we can take them off our list.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. And Commissioner Debbie, about Stephen Clark.
So that's Stephen Clark. So I figured out, the article's great. I've sent the thing back to everybody a day or two ago. It's not very long. I just thought it was so interesting, but figured out after looking a little harder was this guy wrote this article back in 2009 or something, and it was for a student law journal at Columbia University Law School. I tried to find, I looked a little bit on the internet to try to find him, but I couldn't find him. So I mean, it's just something he did when he was in law school, and he's not some who knows what he's doing now. So we can cross that one off. And then I forgot there was one other one that was on that list that I don't remember what it was, and I can say, if anybody remembers what it said, I can maybe follow up on that. I did find an article on that list that was sort of interesting. And the guy who wrote that, he did it for some journal at the University of California, Hastings Law School. And he appears, I think I found him, he's the deputy city attorney in San Diego now. But I would put him pretty low on the priority list of having him become as an expert to talk to us. But if if anybody thinks it's a good idea, at least I did sort of figure out where he is.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Who we need to hear from? Okay, Commissioner Dunn?
Yeah, I'm just gonna also be pretty quick because I tried to get a hold of Eileen Luna Firebaugh, who actually has a new name. Anyway, but I couldn't get through to her. And I tried to get through to Campaign Zero. I emailed them and tried calling them. I tried contacting the person who used to work there, but doesn't anymore. Their website really doesn't look like it's been updated since 2021, which is weird in today's day and age, considering they were born out of the, or they were propelled to prominence out of the George Floyd uprising in 2020. And now it doesn't even seem like they can return people's emails. So I don't know if Campaign Zero is still available. The information they have on their website is very good. We should probably look at that, but I can't get a hold of them. And then as far as the Samuel Walker, I guess since I'm having trouble with my other two experts, I will put him on my list because I'm the one who put his name forward after I heard it spoken. And so I will try to get in touch with him between now and our next meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. So, Monica?
So I was asked to look into the National Police Accountability Project. They're part of the National Lawyers Guild, and it's based in Louisiana. And it's basically a database of legal experts. They have, I'm going to share my screen and just go to their website. There's, let me see where, okay, so here we go. I don't know if you can you see that? So the National Police Accountability Project, they have several lawyers in different cities. They don't have one in Portland. What I found, they have several purposes. One of their purposes is to represent cases that could create a basically avenues for justice for civilians. It's mostly a civilians advocate group of lawyers. And what they're trying to do is make precedents in the courts so that civilians have more recourse and more ability to access justice. And they have here, I don't know if I go to this in public resources, they have sections on different pieces of what they think make it difficult to access justice as a civilian. And each one of these, for example, qualified immunity, have an information sheet. So it's interesting information. And I don't know how we could use it in our purpose, but it's educational for sure. So like if we go to the qualified immunity fact sheet, there is definitions and different quotes and things that we could follow up on to learn more about it. But I think that there's a lot of more focus on federal aspects of law and how they can change the law in the federal environment to help in police accountability. So I kind of didn't feel like, I mean, it's good information, but not sure how we could use it directly with our cause in Portland per se. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. And Commissioner Sophia, are you going to email?
No.
Oh, you can attack. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I got a moment. Yes, I did contact a person from NAACP who referred me to someone else that I sent an email to today, and hopefully I can get a hold of them this week so I can get more information. So that's in the works. Hopefully maybe tomorrow. I don't know. I just sent the email today and I called today. So it seems like I should be able to get hold of them before the end of the week.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Now, even we have a few minutes for open discussion. If somebody would like to discuss something of what it says, it sounds like a lot of you will continue following up or finding more information. But Commissioner Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed our last meeting, so you guys may have to discuss this then, but I assume people are aware of the publications by cops. Are people seen those out there? If not, I would recommend those, COPS. So for example, the folks I was looking at were funding some of those COPS studies, but there's a couple of really important reports that they put out on accountability. And then have people looked at, I think it's NACOLE, Nicole? I don't know if are people familiar with that? Have we talked about that one? So they have a directory of people familiar with that directory. That's a super helpful document, I think. So, okay, I just wanted to be sure people were, it seems like those are the, out of everything I've been researching, those are really the two definitive sources. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. Commissioner Dunn, and then Commissioner Angie.
Yeah, actually, I thought that we had NACOLE on our list of groups or experts to follow up with. Actually, I don't see it here in the list of today's report backs. So I don't know if somebody had said they were going to contact them, but they, you know, they're basically an umbrella group where every civilian review agency in the country is a member, and they had a conference here in Portland many years ago. So yeah, I think it'd be interesting to talk to the folks there to see if they have advice.
Thank you. We'll put it on the list. And Commissioner Angie?
Thank you. I also wanted to bring up the fact that that skeleton document to put in that we're going to be sending out to put in information from the jurisdictions. There's a complementary skeleton document to put in information related to these groups like NACOL and COP. Your suggested, highlights that you would like to discuss further with this group. So just an FYI, if you have read, like Catherine or Debbie or anybody that's read anything in any of those documents that you think that we could use, please add that to the skeleton documents that Sophia and I are going to be sending out to you guys. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have anybody has another question or suggestion? Yes, Commissioner Debbie?
So I figured out how to put something, a document in the chat. So the list I came up with is in the chat now of the ideas for what to include in our system, best practices sort of thing.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments? Can we go to slide 19, please? Okay. At the next meeting, we will continue the discussion on suggestions to consider and proposals to avoid from experts and academics. If you already done research and you want to update it, please just send an email with your notes attached to staff and co-chairs, ideally by this Thursday, so they can be added of the subcommittee on research resources page on the website, and co-chairs can reflect your notes and the draft document. Are there any new experts or academics, what are the things or anything like that? No previous research that the members would like to claim? I know we already talked about Samuel Walker, that's Commissioner Dan. And Debbie suggested Kevin King. And also Monica put, and the Commissioner Monica put in the chat that she will be happy to research about NACO. Commissioner Dan?
Well, I just want to repeat the suggestion that came from the New York Community Board staff person for the Center. Oh, I just lost it again. Center for Policing Inequity, which I've been so busy I haven't had time to look at their website. So I don't know if anybody's interested in that, but that was a strong suggestion from New York, where they had the stop and frisk program and a lot of really serious racial profiling going on.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Dan. We will now take public comment on the issues the subcommittee discussing, and our community members can also tell their story about policing and police accountability. We ask members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 2 minutes in length and raise their hand on Zoom if you like to speak. Members of the public, if you like to speak, please raise your hand. Okay, we don't have any hand, but on the public, thank you very much for being here. And Commissioner Dan?
Got to put my hand down, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Then can we go to slide, yes, slide 21. This is the time for co-chairs and facilitators to summarize any items brought up today which didn't fit into today's agenda. We recap those items here and use them on developing future agendas. We won't be using this time to add new items not previously mentioned or to discuss them, but we will use this list to develop future agendas so these items can be discussed. I want to recap the garden plot, please. Ayomide or staff, go ahead, Ayomide.
The only thing that I got was basically for folks to get assigned, which it seems like it's being done for researching Nicole, COPS, and then Center for Police and Equity. That's all I've got on my garden plot.
Thank you.
So it's the only thing, it's not the exact same path into the garden plot as perhaps normal, but with relation to the draft development, which will be used to develop future agendas. Any research notes which are received by this Thursday will be posted to the subcommittee on research resources page on the website by Friday, so that members have a chance to read and review those notes prior to next Monday, August 1st subcommittee meeting. And any suggestions for inclusion into the draft document of actual text, not the placeholder text that is currently in there, received by Thursday will be reviewed by subcommittee co-chairs over the weekend for inclusion into a actual draft as a starting point for discussion on the document next Monday as well, which again is August 1st, the next meeting of the subcommittee.
Thank you. Can we go to slide 22nd, please? 22. Yeah, it's okay. Don't worry about it. We want adjourn the meeting. Today is July 25th, and it is 8:56. Thank you to all the members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions today. They were very valuable. Thank you also for the interpreters supporting access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and its subcommittees for all Portlanders. Thank you to our briefers for coming and spending your time sharing your thoughts with the commission and the public. Finally, thank you to the members of the community for attending and contributing your thoughts and questions. Also, I will say thank you to every commissioner that did their homework and share all the information they find in this research, and thank you for sharing for all of that. And please sign up for emails updates to the Police Accountability Commission work. Thank you very much and good night. See you next week. Thank you.